problem. So welcome to the What Matters Most show. How are you? Good?
I'm doing well. I'm interested in what matters most.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah,
And I don't know if I've had a chance to send you my book yet, but I will do that. I'll have Daniela send you a copy.
thank you.
But to start, I would love to introduce you properly to my community. Obviously, your community knows who you are, but you have a nice, short, sweet bio, and then I'll have you elaborate on everything that you're working on. So Caryn is a leadership coach for people who are ready to get over the struggle with whatever it is getting in their way, distracting them and wasting their time. She helps them gain speed on their goals and cut out what isn't working. And I love the shortness and sweetness of that because you go right to the point there. And I know you have a background in wellness and weight loss, right? And that's
Yeah,
something that you're transitioning out of, which I found that everything's very systemic, and one thing in one area of our life is obviously always affecting the other. So I'm sure you could connect those dots with weight loss and obesity and wellness issues with leadership.
absolutely.
I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. It seems like one area,
Yeah,
if we're tending to buffer our lives with food, or it could be alcohol or overspending, it's all the same thing.
yeah. Yeah, so let's start with just a couple of questions, then we'll get into more of a free flow conversation. But what do you think is, what are your unique beliefs about leading? Because, leadership it can be subjective, but I think that there's some very basic foundational things that you probably would find across, whether you're talking about leadership for talking to a group of 3-year-olds or you're talking to high performing entrepreneurs, right?
Right. I think the main thing that I want to talk about in leadership is actually stepping up to the role. I think oftentimes we end up in leadership roles and you think about your favorite teacher, your least favorite teacher, your favorite coach or your least favorite coach, your favorite boss or the boss you couldn't stand. All those roles had so much power. And when we can take that powerful role and use it to impact people's lives, it just has a huge effect on everything around them, their families, their children, their family history. So I think it's just a super fun place to get to play with people in an arena that really matters.
I love it. I love it. And what would you want for the listeners? Because we do have I know you have an entrepreneurial community, and I certainly do as well. What would you want every person who leads a team to know? So for the managers and the high level execs that are leading teams, what is sort of your go-to formula? And I know it can be subjective depending on the conversation, but
I think primarily it's that people crave leadership. I think sometimes we want to hold back and we don't want to impose too much, but most people are showing up wanting to be led. And if you have the opportunity to be in the role, you have to take advantage of it. And even if it's uncomfortable, and maybe especially if it's uncomfortable, taking that role on in the most powerful way possible and really stepping up to that position.
I love it. I love it. So can you give us some tangible examples of some clients that you've worked with in the past or you're currently working with, and tangibly, how does it work for some people that are listening that would potentially hire you?
Mm-hmm. I think there's two ways that it shows up. One is my life looks really good on paper. Why do I still feel like shit? Right. And the other one is I've got a lot of my stuff together. Things are going really well, but there's this thing that I want to do. I want to do it with speed. So those are the two people that I see coming to work with me and who I really like working with.
So when you say speed, talk about that, elaborate.
So I think coaching is really how do I get two brains on one life and one problem or one outcome I want to achieve, and getting perspective on it and just helping people see what might be right here, but you can't really see it. I know that's what I get from my coach. So I like offering that to leaders. And then the other side is when people are coming in and they're very distracted by, it could be imposter syndrome or just kind of feeling deflated in their life, in their situation, thinking I should be happy here. How come I'm not? That it's, if I can get out of the way of that distraction and enjoy my life again, then the impact comes back, the impact that I want to have versus kind of lacking that.
I love it.
impact at all.
I love it. I love it. It makes sense. And so I'm sure because you've worked on both sides of the equation, can you talk about the correlation between either leadership or maybe a lack of leadership, for lack of a better term, for clients that are really struggling with their bodies or their health or their wellness? Because I certainly see a correlation with, well, with me personally to start, but I think, it's across the board, right? I don't think that there's special rules. There's certain foundational things like we talked about earlier that are across the board, whether you're talking to a 3-year-old or a 87-year-old.
Right. And it's just like parenting, right? So if you have stuff going on in your family, or your kid has a new thing, a new challenge that you're working on, you're always the first thing to go. It's so much easier to say, I can put myself last, than it is to say, put your 3-year-old last, or your employees last, or your company last. So it's just like, it's always the easiest route. And it's also always the route that gets you, kind of sucks the life out of you the fastest. So usually it's the food plan, it's the drinking water, it's getting to bed on time, it's walking if you love to walk, or yoga if you love yoga. It's all that stuff gets thrown out the window first.
It's not rocket science, is it?
No, it's not. It's the same thing everywhere we go.
So let's talk about leadership. You mentioned you have a 3-year-old. I have a 5 and a 7-year-old. Do you have a little girl or a little boy?
A little girl.
Awesome.
Yeah, she's fierce.
Different energy than I'm dealing with, I'm sure. It's incredible how different the energy is between little girls and little boys. But so talk about, for the parents listening, and selfishly, I want to know your feedback on leadership as parents. I lead teams in business, and humbly I say I think I do a good job of it. But obviously, I'm always learning, and there's always room for improvement. But when it comes to parenting, I catch myself getting frustrated and anxious, and losing. Yeah. I guess losing patience is probably the best way to just boil it down. And obviously that's not good leadership, right? I mean, our kids are more than anyone in the world. I mean, I could give, every parent knows that's listening. I mean, they're just little monkey see, monkey do, and sponges at this point. And they're, especially the formative years. So what do you recommend? What are you doing? I guess let's start with, what are you doing at home?
I kind of have a leg up on the parenting side of things. I used to run a program for training and supporting foster parents. So this was an evidence-based practice. I got to sell the program that the scientists developed, and I got to work with her and her coaches. So I did this work for a while before I even had a kid. And one of the main things that comes up for me is having a plan ahead of time. So if I know what my parenting strategies are ahead of time, I can stay way cooler. I can stay way more patient, because no matter what she brings up, I know this is how I'm going to handle that. This is how I'm going to handle that. I have, we use a lot of incentives. So in parenting, probably the same as in leading, it's, you want to be about 5 to 1, which is just a human rule. Is I want to give you 5 constructive pieces of positive feedback to everyone constructive. I said that wrong, but 5 pieces of positive, specific praise to everyone constructive. So I try to do that same thing with her. So if I tell her good job on something, I get really specific about, I really like the way you put the right amount of toothpaste on your toothbrush and then put it back in the cupboard, or whatever it is. Yeah. And then when I have something that's, more of a reprimand, it's less often.
That's interesting. I've never heard of the 5 to 1 ratio, but I will give it a whirl. Some of the best parenting advice I've done, we've hosted events with parents and children, and we had Dr. Shafali. I don't know if you've ever heard her or followed her work, but she has some incredible, very simple, but very wisdom-filled advice for parenting. And yeah, my biggest takeaway is parent yourself first before you try and parent your kids, right? And that's, you had your own spin on that, where you were talking about, not reacting. You're responding versus reacting is how I would describe it in my household. But again, to be transparent, that's a lot easier said than done. And it's a practice every day we get up, right?
Right. It is. Yeah. So we also try to look at, like, what does our kid really like? And can I incentivize behavior? Not bribe, but like, if you do all these things, then you can have something that you like. Just like me, when I go to work, then I get a paycheck. when I show up and do things other people like, I get rewards for that. So I like to set that up for her too. And she loves it.
Love it. Actions have consequences. We could probably instill some more of that in our household, but we're doing the best we can. I think at the end,
we all are.
If your children know that they're loved, then the rest of the detail irons itself out.
Absolutely.
So just to acknowledge, we have some people chiming in and saying hello. Allison, Maureen Barrett. You guys have any questions for Caryn? She is a wealth of knowledge in leadership and parenting. And let's talk about your book. I don't know anything about your book, so I'm anxious to. I know, and thank you. We are going to share a link, a free copy of her book, and the link in the conversation here. So you can get that probably at the end of the call. But let's talk about that. What is your book called? Tell me about it.
It's called I Wanted It, and it is a weight loss book. It basically tells you every single thing that I did to lose weight and end my struggle and distraction with food. And it's everything I use with my clients to this day who are still doing that work. It's all in there. And there is this extra chapter for business travelers. So if there are people who are traveling all the time, there's a way to make that easier on yourself.
So you struggled with you were scratching your own itch like most entrepreneurs, then you struggled with weight at some point in your life?
Yeah.
Because I can only see you from the neck up, but you look very fit.
Yeah, I do not have this problem anymore. It was much more a distraction, and I realized I'm spending way too much of my brain power and my energy thinking about food, thinking about what I should eat, or caring about food, weight, number on the scale, size of my pants. I knew that that was a waste of time, and I didn't quite know how to solve for it. So once I figured it out, I was like, we have to tell more people about this. We're going to write this book. And I worked with a whole bunch of clients, and I'm still working with some of them today on ending that struggle so that they can take the energy and put it into what they actually care about. Because I don't think any of the women I'm working with or the men want to spend their time thinking about what they're eating. It's just not that fun.
Yeah, simple advice. So I've never, knock on wood, I've never struggled with weight, but I have a lot of close family and friends that have, and I'm sure I'm singing to the choir here. It seems to me that losing weight, I won't use the word easy, but if you have any kind of plan in front of you and you follow it, you're going to lose weight. Mm-hmm. The rub is that people tend to, from my experience, turn around and put it right back on.
Yeah.
So tell me, or more importantly for the listeners, what is your take, your feedback, your resolve for that? Because I mean, sustainability in health is, I mean, honestly, I have so many friends that I see that they'll lose 30 pounds, gain 40, lose 50 pounds, gain 60. And it's like, I mean, that's got to be brutal on the system to be going in that fluctuation like that.
And it can be emotionally devastating because you get so excited and you feel like I finally got this. The problem with the majority, or maybe even all of diets, is that we have this magical thinking that I will eat a certain way until the weight comes off, and then I will go back to eating the way I ate before. The way you ate before got you the result you had before. So when you go back to it, you're going to get the same result you had before.
It's as simple as a lack of discipline and sticking to the program that got you into good shape. Is it that simple?
It is that simple, but I like to say, just don't do anything you're not willing to do forever. So don't get on another diet. Just figure out what can I do and do it in a way that I can see myself 5 years from now, 20 years from now, still doing this thing. Yeah. So it's not about crashing into a diet, trying to lose 20 pounds. It's like, what are the tweaks that I can make? And there's a lot of information in the book about what actually will work. What are the tweaks that will work as opposed to the tweaks that won't work or that will leave you overly hungry and wanting to overeat.
Very interesting. Yeah, it's, I know there's no magic pill for it, but as you know, being in that space and being an expert, I mean, there is information overload on the types of diets, the type of information it's overwhelming. Like I can't imagine if I was struggling with that, where, you don't even know where to start, right?
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of people feel really stuck and like there's no way to get it right because you hear so much different information.
Yeah. So just to acknowledge Caryn, thank you for joining. If you have any questions for Caryn, we are talking right now about weight loss, and she is an expert in leadership and a mom. So I know most of you are moms. I think everyone that I see that I know that's watching live is is a mom. So we're just talking about leadership and wellness and how that ties back into parenting, which is always an interesting conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So from personal experience, if you don't mind me asking, you got into the weight loss business to begin with to scratch your own itch because you said you were overweight yourself. So talk about that. Were you obese at one point in your life, or you just had a few extra pounds, or what was your experience with it, and how did you become so passionate about, making a career of it?
I think the primary thing that I wanted relief from or freedom from was emotional overeating. And so using food in the absence of hunger. That's the definition of emotional eating. So getting over that, and just getting over the distraction of always being hungry. I'm trying to think, at my heaviest weight, I've probably lost 30 to 50 pounds, and I got a lot skinnier than I am right now. And I felt what that was like. And I saw myself in the mirror and I didn't really like it. And so I'm at this point figuring out what's the weight I really love being at. And I'm adding a lot of muscle and I like being strong. And so now I'm just figuring out what's the body I want to do this life in, which is such a different conversation in my brain than I need to be smaller.
Yeah, so much more important than how you feel than actually how much the scale tells you weigh, right?
Right.
Because muscle is obviously a lot heavier than fat. So it's, you can be heavier but be really fit.
Yeah.
Interesting. So do you have any feedback, or I've implemented years ago intermittent fasting, and I still do it on a daily basis. And when my body tells me I'll do a 48 hour or a 3 day or whatever my body's telling me I need. Do you have any feedback or experience with fasting, just to educate the listeners? Because to me personally, it's been incredible.
Yeah. I love it. And it's not something that I advise my clients to do until they've figured out how to get over the emotional eating side, or they've got some extra tools to handle it. But I think it feels really good. I love to do it as well. I'm curious how you do it exactly. Do you fat fast, or do you just use water? How does it work?
So when I say intermittent fasting, so I'll have dinner, and then I skip breakfast. So in the morning when I wake up, I do room temperature water with lemon. We live in Florida, so I have a big lemon tree in my backyard, so I'm a little spoiled there. So I don't ever have an excuse not to do that. And then I do coffee in the morning, and then I don't put any solid food in my system, usually before 12 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, that's just what works for me. I'm not telling the listeners to do that. I listen to my body, and I found myself like force feeding myself to eat in the morning. And I'm thinking, why the hell am I doing this? I feel sluggish by 10 a.m. So I have a whole ritual in the morning. I don't make any business appointments or calls before 12. So my whole morning is planned out for me and my health and my wellness,
Nice.
my spirituality. And the intermittent fasting it's just one less thing I have to worry about in the morning. Like you talked about, it's really interesting how much time we spend on preparing food and thinking about it. And it's ridiculous if you think about it.
Right.
So I take a third of that out of my scheduling or my thinking or my energy use by taking it out of my calendar. And I've found it works really well for my body. I have more energy, more clarity. And when I do cheat and I go, say I'm on a business trip, which travel can screw you up with diet, which I'm sure you could talk about. And meeting someone for a breakfast meeting is an exception to the rule if I'm on the road and I eat something, I always feel like shit 2 hours later. It's like, why are you doing this? It's like that.
Right.
For me, probably not less emotional and more, not wanting to sit across from an investor or a colleague and they're eating and they're like looking at me like, why isn't this guy eating? But if I just explain to them, hey, I intermittent fast, I'll just have a cup of coffee. They'd probably be like, oh, that's cool. But it's
Right.
it's funny how we will harm our bodies just because we think that's what the person sitting across the table thinks is normal.
Right, exactly. So it might not be emotional eating for you, but you're trying to think about their emotion. So I'm going to eat so they don't have to feel awkward.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
crazy. I mean, a perfect example of that is every day at my breakfast table with my children. They're young and growing, and my wife and I prepare breakfast for them every morning. And her and I sit and I drink my water and my coffee, and I don't think twice about it with the kids, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. My daughter asked me, why aren't you eating breakfast? And I just tell her, I'm not hungry. And I have a lot of clients who we have that in our head. We need 6 small meals a day to keep our metabolism up. Breakfast is a healthy meal for the day. Those are just thoughts that culture gave us. They're not actually true. And so some people are truly not hungry in the morning. And if you're not hungry, you don't have to eat ever. And sometimes just that amount of permission is enough for people to lose 10 pounds.
Yeah. And then you asked about my experience. I talked about the intermittent fasting. I've had some incredible experience with longer, faster cleanse. I've done it's called the Panchakarma, which is like an 8-day. I wouldn't call it a full fast, but it's mostly just water and tea and some vegetables. And it's an Ayurvedic 8-day cleanse. And I've had some incredible experiences that I could talk about for hours, but, yeah, I know, your body tends to tell you when you need it. And if I pay attention to that and do it, then the results are pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
What's your experience with do you do any kind of extended fasting or?
I've done I did a bone broth fast, and I was planning to go 5 days, but there was a point on day 4 where I was like, nope, my body is really ready for a meal. And so I had a meal and that felt great. But typically I don't do breakfast, but I have kind of it's a beverage. It's not coffee. I've actually given up coffee, which is kind of unbelievable to me at this point. But so that actually keeps your insulin level low, similar to fasting. That's how I get through that period of time. But I really enjoy fasting and giving my body a break, because your body's doing one of 2 things. It's either going to be burning the fuel you have stored, or it's going to be burning the fuel that you have in your stomach. So if your stomach's always full of food, it never gets to tap in and burn all the meals we have hanging around on our bodies.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way of a good analogy for the listeners. You just said something there and I wanted to come back at you with a question about it.
Fasting?
I'm having a senior moment. Oh no, you mentioned coffee, which I just had my afternoon cup of coffee. I actually, I'd love your feedback on it. Number one, being a wellness expert or a health expert, because you read one article and they say it's incredible as long as you're getting organic beans and you're grinding them in the morning, and there's laundry list of health benefits. And then there's also the next article that will tell you, cut it out of your diet, the acidity and the pH balance gets thrown out of whack. And so what's your take on it, being an expert?
I think, because I'm not a nutritionist at all, but I just think about things that there are things that are positives and things that are negatives. And yeah, coffee is acidic, so maybe that's a negative. But if it works for you and you're doing enough positive things, then it's fantastic. The reason I cut it out was I was overusing coffee, because when I went into business for myself, I also had a full-time job and I had a baby. So I learned to overuse coffee, and it really wasn't working so well for my body. So I'm just tapping into what are my real energy levels throughout the day. And once I get through this period of kind of learning that, I'm happy to bring coffee back in.
So it could be temporary for you. You were using it as a stimulant versus, as a health benefit. Yeah.
Yeah.
My experience is, I think that the water with the lemon along with it, goes right back to balance out the pH there. And that's 5,000-year-old Ayurvedic practice of something as simple as water and lemon.
Yeah, my husband does that every morning. And since he started doing it, I think 3 weeks in, he hasn't had heartburn since then.
Yeah, I mean, the benefits of that we could talk for hours about. Again, I think for the listeners, check out anything that's Ayurvedic. Or are you familiar with Ayurvedic system of health?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I just had a call coming in that I have to deflect here. So yeah, where to from here? So I always look at balance, and especially in leadership, you want to sort of walk the talk. And my background is in real estate investments for the last 20 plus years, and I do a lot of speaking, and I'm an author, and I meet and speak to and interview a lot of very successful people that, again, success maybe in the financial sector of their lives, but then there's all kinds of challenges and struggles in what I call I call it the 5 F's. So it's faith, fitness, family, friends, and finance. And there's a lot of entrepreneurs that I'm friendly with that, are crushing it in the finance, right?
Mhm.
They have huge bank accounts and big companies and lots of employees, but maybe they're 200 pounds overweight or going through their third divorce, or emotionally withdrawn from their friends. So how do you approach that conversation, from a leadership? I mean, leadership needs to start with yourself, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I'm sure you have similar experiences with clients. I thought you could compartmentalize these things, and I think you can to some degree, depending on the conversation and where you're at in your life. But I find, sooner or later, if I had a client that's crushing it in finance and they're doing really good in their business, I find that if I circle back to them, maybe months or years later, that something was, all the cards weren't on the table in the conversation around finance in the business. And it's
Yeah.
like a ticking time bomb. So it's like, you compartmentalize these things, right? But then they also are very systemic and they all seem to flow back into one another.
Yeah.
Uh, so from your experience, um, in the leadership part of your business, how does that tie in?
I think that there are different times of life where some of them are going to be more important than others and take up more of your time. The part where it can get really tricky is if your values aren't lining up with them. So maybe the financial one is the most important, but you're also really high on the family side and you're completely ignoring your family because you're trying to make a certain amount of money. So I think figuring out what's the result I'm trying to create and what's the standard I'm wanting to hold is really important, because most of the time too, we don't even know when we're failing because we didn't set up like what would success look like. So I think you can have a really quote unquote unbalanced looking wheel of life, but it can be okay if that's what you set out to achieve and you're honoring your own personal values in that transition.
Very interesting. So how I describe that is just crystal clarity on your own priorities, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very well said.
Well, it's just, I always try to really simplify things, not only selfishly for myself, but then also to help, anyone that I'm working with. So,
Yeah.
and I think we all are dealing with the same, challenges and rubs in those 5 areas of life that we talked about. It's just, we're all at different points in our lives, and maybe, when you shine a light, I've created some simple tools where you can shine a light on where you actually need the help, but we're all dealing with very similar problems, I think.
Yeah. And I do think it can be hard to have that idea of a balanced life out there. It can, from that self-judgment place, mean like, I don't know if I have a balanced life, but you get to decide what does balance look like for you. And you have to take that personal responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah. And balance, I mean, if something's in complete balance, then it's stagnant and dying, right? So I think that's sort of a word that I'm careful of throwing around.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I think you hit the nail on the head. If it's working for you and you feel good about it, then do it. It's no different than what you're describing on coaching your clients around food, right?
Yeah,
If
exactly.
it's
If you want
systemic.
to eat pizza every day and you can find a way to make it work, then make it work and own it and love it and get over yourself. Like, so much of it is our own judgment about what we're doing. Like, let's not fight with reality. We have other fights to fight.
I love the simplicity of that. That's incredible. It's so simple, but so wisdom filled, because I think that there's too much information out there and too many options for too many different types of diets and gluten this and, keto that. And I mean, it's overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot out there.
Yeah. So let's shift a little bit. Tell me about your background and what faith means to you.
The first word that popped into my head was connected. So for me, faith means just being connected to whatever that thing is, whatever that source, energy, universe, God, like whatever it is for you.
So for the parents that are listening, how does that relate to being a new mom?
Mm. You got to have faith if you're parenting. Like, this is the hardest job I've ever done. And the whole time since I had Lib, I've been like, this is the craziest thing that everyone is doing.
Well, not everyone's doing it, but I think the majority of us are, right?
Yeah.
And I actually have, while I mentioned that, I mean, I have a lot of friends that have decided not to have kids, and I have so much respect for them that they actually have consciously had that conversation with their partner that, hey,
Yeah.
we're not going to have kids. We'll have dogs and we'll travel, or we'll do whatever it is that works for them. And I find a lot of judgment around, young, healthy couples that have decided not to have kids. And I think, you know what, I have so much respect for those people because there's a lot of people that bring children into the world that probably didn't have the conversation and maybe shouldn't have. not that any, I shouldn't say it that way. No child being brought into the world is an accident, but there's definitely it should be a conscious decision whether you're doing it or not doing it, I think.
Right. Yeah. And I grew up very luckily with so many grown-ups who didn't have their own kids. And it was one of my favorite things about my life. So I'm very conscious of the fact that I want to have these people in our family life. It's an important role in society.
I love it. So any more in the mix for you? No pressure here. We're just on the World Wide Web. Any more babies?
I consciously chose to have one child.
See, there
on
you go.
purpose. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I'm sure getting a lot of love there.
Yeah. She requires a lot of leadership.
You said Libby is her name?
Yeah, Liv.
That's cool. What are you doing for school, out of curiosity?
For her?
Yeah, she's young, I know.
Yeah, she has a daycare that we really love that has a preschool in it. And then we live a mile from the brand new Spanish immersion public school there. She's going to go in a couple of years.
How cool is that? Do you speak Spanish or?
I don't, but my husband does.
Is he Latin or?
Nope, he's from California.
That's so cool. We just got back from my wife is German and born and raised in Europe. So she's very disciplined and exclusively speaking German to the kids in our house, and then obviously English. And then every winter we go down to Puerto Rico and put them in a Spanish immersion Waldorf down there. So awesome. You're singing to my ears there with that. That's cool. We don't have that. We certainly don't have a public option for that. So that's pretty awesome that you have that. You're in a bigger, I mean, Eugene is a pretty good sized town. I haven't been there in 30 years. So
it's the second largest city in Oregon.
Yeah. So you have more resources there. I live on a little barrier island in a little beach town. We have a big city, but it's an hour up the road, and there is options for that, but I'm not going to drive an hour to them. So
no. Yeah. Nice choice.
That's so cool. Yeah. Our experience, I'm probably telling you something you already know it opens up doors and pathways to the children's learning and their confidence building and our confidence building as parents. It's something as simple as a second, third language is remarkable. I mean, my 5-year-old is speaking 3 languages and I'm still trying to figure out English.
I know. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And you said you don't speak Spanish.
No, I took some Spanish in high school. I took some Norwegian in college. She has an uncle who speaks French, a French aunt. She has cousins who speak Spanish. So we're kind of all over the board.
Wow, that's so cool. Well, that's awesome that you have that option. So let's talk about, I talked about the 5 F's before. What does friends or friendship mean to you?
Everything. That's a big one for me. I like to connect with people and stay connected. I had a huge wedding. I stay in touch with lots of friends to this day, and not a lot of them live in this town, but I love technology like this where we can share a glass of wine over a Zoom call or something like that.
Pretty amazing, huh?
It is.
It is remarkable if you think about it. I mean, these platforms didn't exist, I don't know, 10 years ago, or if they did, they certainly weren't as user-friendly as this,
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah, it sort of connects the whole globe here. So finance, let's talk about finance and what that means for you. You're a business owner, entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm. I think finance means freedom to me. I like to make money. I like to save it. I like to spend it on things I really like. I'm pretty conscious with my money and I know where it's going and where it's coming from. I think it's a fun thing.
Awesome. I love your short and sweet and simple answers because you can go down a rabbit hole with any of these, as you know.
Yeah.
Is your husband involved in your business just out of curiosity, or he's doing his own thing?
He's not even a little bit involved. He is not an entrepreneur.
He's doing it. He's at a corporate gig or doing his own thing.
Yeah, he's going to be going to work at the university soon, but he actually works in plants and animals. So, like, he worked in Belize for a while and does all sorts of crazy things. I met him when he was researching bats.
When you say plants and animals, you mean like flora and fauna?
Yeah, like he grows plants. He loves native plants. He worked with the harpy eagle in Belize. He researched, all sorts of weird birds and
It's really
that
interesting.
stuff that I know nothing about.
It's funny that you said that. He's not, and it's funny because that's how I would describe my wife if you asked me the question. But I have a mentor who has a really interesting definition of entrepreneur, and he says his definition is anyone that takes responsibility. So, like I would say, psychologically or traditionally, maybe it's the better way to put it. My wife is not an entrepreneur. She's actually a professor in physical therapy, so she's teaching medical students to become doctors. But she's one of the most responsible people I know. So maybe she is an entrepreneur. Maybe your husband is a great entrepreneur, but we're society's
Mm-hmm.
definition of that looks very different.
Yeah. And I would call him a leader. Like every job he's had, I think he's just like one of the best employees you could ever get because he's very responsible. He's an upholder. He does everything he says he will, and he does a really good job. So I think in that sense, yeah, they
Yeah,
both are that.
yeah, exactly. That's so cool. So, tell me, what's the craziest thing that you've ever done in your life? Little shift. You didn't know that was coming at you, or maybe you did.
Uh, I took a job on a commercial fishing boat, and I'd commercial fished before, so this part wasn't that crazy. But this boat in particular was a family boat, and we were going to be out on the ocean for like 10 days to 2 weeks straight, where you can't even see land, bobbing back and forth, long lining, which I'd never done before. So that was a little bit crazy.
So you have a background in, or at some point in your life was as a commercial fisherman,
Yeah,
fisher woman. I'm sorry.
yeah, that's how I got through college. I paid for it with my fishing income.
Holy shit! Talk about that. Elaborate. That's so cool. My brother did that in Rhode Island, lobstering.
Yeah, so I grew up in Southeast Alaska. So I worked in the fishing industry. I worked in a cannery through high school, saved that money for college, met a local guy who I'd known, and I just said, I want to work on a boat. And the next summer, he bought one and said, Hey, I bought a boat. Do you want to work on it? And so I worked for him. It was a family boat with he and his son and his nephew. And we did that for 4 summers. And then I shifted it up and graduated from college and moved on to other boats. But
So
yeah.
cool. So are you an exception to the rule in that industry? Because I mean the Hollywood shows that you see on TV, it's always all men. I don't think I've ever seen a woman on a boat. So were you an exception, or is there a lot of women in the?
There were a lot of daughters on their dad's boats. And then there were more and more women now, but it's definitely not the rule.
So you must have some crazy stories if you've been offshore for. I'm a surfer and I love the ocean, and it's a unpredictable
Yeah.
wheelhouse if you're offshore for 2 weeks in a boat. So got any crazy stories around that? I'm sure you do. Storms.
Some storms, different boats being on storms. We took one the boat I worked on for 4 years was 85 feet, an old wooden boat. And we tried to take it down around the town of Ketchikan in Southeast Alaska and get out to this bay that you had to get on the ocean to go into. But we could not make the turn because the waves were too big. So we were just out there forever. And then going into this bay, it was like two rock walls completely fogged in, and he'd never gone in there before. But you go in and then it just opens up to this perfect little sheltered cove. But that was a crazy trip. And we had kayaks on the top deck and this kayak holder. And the kayak holder was coming apart and the something on the back deck was tipping over. Like it was crazy. We were not ready. We hadn't done the ocean in that way as that crew in that boat. So we had a lot to learn.
Talk about threading the needle. Did you actually get into the harbor without smashing the boat, or no?
Yeah, it all worked out.
You're
Took a
here.
lot longer than we thought.
I was going to say you're here having the conversation, but that doesn't mean you didn't smash the boat.
Yeah. Nope, never smashed a boat.
I just signed up for an 83-mile race from the Bimini, Bahamas to South Florida on a stand-up paddleboard. So I'm a little anxious about it. I've started training, and I love the ocean, but we'll be paddling open ocean in the middle of the night there for 80 something miles. So that's going to be,
That's amazing.
talk about getting out of your comfort zone.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
What's the longest paddleboard race you've done before?
5 miles. So this one's a little different. So
Way to throw yourself into it.
well, it's a 4-man team. So everyone will be doing basically a marathon, 21 miles. But yeah, I'm really excited about it. It's not about me. It's about raising money for cystic fibrosis. There's an incredible, if you want to check out a cool video to watch and actually show your daughter, it's called Crossing for a Cure. I can send it to you.
Yeah.
A father that's about our age with a daughter that's about our kid's age that has CF, and he's a waterman, and started researching and finding out about the healing benefits of salt water around cystic fibrosis. And so he started this race and this fundraiser, and now it's this full blown, there's, thousands of people involved and sponsors. And so it's raising money for cystic fibrosis. So it's,
awesome.
It's happening Father's Day weekend. So I'm bringing my family and, going to get the kids involved and educate them on CF and how, there's people their age that have it,
Yeah. Yeah.
It's going to be a good experience. I'm excited about it.
Cool. Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, I'll keep you posted. So to wrap up, back to the finance piece, if I gave you a blank check and slid you a blank check across the virtual table here, and you never had to think about money again for you or your family, what would you do for the rest of your time on Earth?
That's awesome. I would do actually exactly what I'm doing. And I had this, I was driving up the interstate one day and I saw the Powerball thing. The number was this huge amount of money. And I thought like, oh, what would I do? And I've actually done everything that I thought I would have done at that point. I'm like, okay, so I'm actually living my dream life. Maybe I'd buy a couple new things, but this is it. Like, I have the life I've always wanted to have.
Yeah, you're your own leader. I love that.
Yeah.
It's incredible because I get that people's own version of that answer quite a bit. And, I think that people are waiting to hear about, buying the Ferrari and the jet and the this and that. And that might bring some temporary happiness, but sustainable joy is what you're talking about. It seems that you have an incredible lifestyle there.
Yeah. Yeah. I like my life.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. Well, I'm bummed I'm not going to get to give you a hug there in San Diego. When are you flying out?
Friday morning.
Yeah, today's Wednesday. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for the listeners, we're talking about the way that Caryn and I came together is through our mutual friend Giovanni Marsico's group, which is called Archangel, which we can tag in the notes here. But that's an incredible group of entrepreneurs. So if you're looking for a way to connect, then that's a great way to do it. Before we time out here, just acknowledge we have people coming in from Australia. My friend Roz from Australia, Nikolai McCann, Eric Kerr. Eric Kerr, you'll probably see him in San Diego. Do you know Eric?
Not yet.
Yeah, he's a big real live Viking, so you won't miss him.
Oh, that's awesome.
But jokes aside, I want to thank you so much for your time, your wisdom. You're a light there. You have a wonderful energy, and I'm sure we'll get to meet in person.
Yeah, maybe in Toronto.
I would like that. Yeah. Are you planning on the annual event?
Yep.
Yeah, that's a lot easier for me because I'm on the East Coast.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. It was good to connect and answer questions. It's always fun.
Yeah. Thank you for the listeners. If you're just coming in, actually, it's already in the notes here. I see that Daniela added it in. Caryn was kind enough to give a free download of her book around weight loss and wellness. So please grab it and share it with your friends and family. And thank you again so much, Caryn. I look forward to meeting you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
All right. Chat soon and travel safe.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.